Good Shabbos. One of the most dramatic moments in the Torah is when Yosef finally reveals who he is to his brothers. And he says, Ani Yosef, I am Yosef, is my father still alive? And in continuation of that statement, he says, don't feel bad that you sold me here, because Hashem orchestrated it so that I become the leader in Egypt. And Vayisimeni of the Pari, he made me a father to Pharaoh. Now, that's a strange statement. What does it mean he made me a father to Pharaoh when Pharaoh made it specifically clear? More than once in the Torah, does the Torah tell us that you will be the prime minister, but my chair will be above you. I'm going to be in charge of you. What does he mean when he says he made him a father to Pharaoh? So, fascinatingly, there's a book that was written lately called Pharaoh's Biblical History, where a person is trying to figure out, based on Egyptian history and biblical history, what pharaohs the Torah is talking about. Now, in the Sefer HaYashar from Rabbeinu Tam, this is written some 800 years ago, as well as the Seder HaDoros, it says that when Yosef interpreted Pharaoh's dream, he also revealed to him that he's going to have a son. And so thereafter he has a son. And in this work called Pharaoh's Biblical History, after the 7 years of plenty, Pharaoh dies. And his son, who's now 6 years old, takes over. So now this son becomes the Pharaoh, this child king, who needs someone to protect him. And that's Yosef. Yosef, the prime minister, who's never going to take over because he's a slave. He's an Ivri, comes from somewhere else. He's the one to protect this child king from anyone else who wants to usurp him and usurp his leadership. And he's his guide. And is like he's a father who has adopted him, this child king, as his own. And that's why when the Egyptians in this week's portion go to Pharaoh and say, we're hungry, we need food, Pharaoh says to them, go to Yosef. Whatever he says, you shall do. Why? He say, look, Yosef's the one running things here. I'm just a kid. Now, the fascinating thing is about this is that he lived that he was king for 96 years. And that's a very significant number, the 96 years. Why? Because 96 years after he takes kingship, he's the king, corresponds to 94 years after all the Jews came to Egypt. And 94 years after the Jews came to Egypt is when Levi, one of the tribes, one of the sons of Yaakov Levi, passes away. He passes away 94 years after they come to Egypt. And our sages tell us that as long as one of the sons of Yaakov was alive, there was no enslavement in Egypt. So it is when this king, who Yosef took under his wing, passes away, that's when the Egyptian enslavement really started. And even that started gradually. So the state of the Jews changed as soon as Levi passed away, but it didn't become very bitter until Miriam is born, which is 86 years prior to the Exodus, which therefore means it's about a difference of 22 years between Levi's passing and Miriam's birth. And that's the gradual decrease of the Jewish stature and state in Egypt. And parenthetically, why was this child king so successful and living such a long life? Because normally in those times, a king was either killed in battle or by a coup. And the mutiny is because Yaakov blessed him. we're told that Yosef takes Yaakov to Pharaoh and he blesses him coming in and going out. So he blessed him twice. And it's that blessing. What did he bless him with? He blessed him with long life. That's why this child was able to live for such a long time. But the question we could ask is, when God tells Abraham that his children are going to be slaves in a land that isn't theirs, he says they're going to be slaves in land that isn't theirs for actually 400 years, and they will sow. Now we know that we calculate the 400 years from Yitzchak's birth. But the question is, the Jews were in Egypt for 210 years. But we're saying that certainly 94 of those years were okay. 94 of those years, there was no enslavement. As a matter of fact, they were at they had the best period of their life. The Jews had great location in Egypt to raise their families, to do the Jewish thing. There was no negativity until Levi passes away, until 94 years after they arrived in Egypt. And the real bitterness is only 86. So it could be that the majority of the time they were in a good state. So how does that make sense? If it says that they would be enslaved for the entire time they were in Egypt. The explanation is that in the idea of being enslaved in Egypt doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the challenge and the hardship of Egyptian enslavement. You see, what Yaakov did when he came to Egypt is he sent Yehuda forward to set up a yeshiva of study. And Torah study in particular involves a lot of effort, idea, tremendous effort in figuring out what the halacha is and the clarifying laws and so on, and exegesis and learning one thing from another. All this takes a lot of toil and effort. And when you have the toil of Torah, as the Pirkei Avos says, Ethics of Our Father says, when you toil in Torah, you take away the toil in other areas of life. So the fact that as long as one of the tribes were alive, the Jewish people sat in yeshiva and studied and toiled in Torah, it was not necessary for them to go through any other challenge. Because ultimately, life's not a picnic. It's not a party. It's not meant to be easy. Easy is in the world to come. Easy is after Mashiach comes. Right now, everything is with effort. And that's what life is about. It's through challenge that we grow. It's through challenge that we achieve. So it's always going to be a challenge. The question is, where our challenge is going to come from. Is it something that we're going to challenge ourselves, or is the challenge going to come from outside? So as long as one of the brothers were alive, they challenged themselves in the Torah study that they had. Once he passed away and the Jews wanted to be more like the Egyptians, then the enslavement came to them and overtook them. This is a lesson in life. We always have to take on challenges, because otherwise we might get challenges from elsewhere. So take on to study more Torah, and take on a challenge of davening with the minyan, and take on challenges of giving more tzedakah. Take on challenges in areas of Torah so that we don't get curveballs and challenges from other directions. There was a fellow who was a wealthy guy, and he started a gemach, it's called, a free loan society for a community, for Torah scholars, and he would support Torah scholars, and he created this. It was quite busy involving himself in this endeavor. And one day he comes to the Chafetz Chaim and he says he wants to stop because it takes away a lot of time from his business, and he wants to get someone else to take him over. So the Chafetz Chaim says to him the following. It says in chapter 23, one of the most famous chapters in Tehillim, it says, Ach toiv v'chesed yirdafuni kol yemei chayei. Only goodness and kindness should pursue me all the days of my life. So the Chafetz Chaim asks him, this word pursue, yirdafuni, is a negative word. What do you mean pursue? It should have said, only goodness and kindness shall find me, should befall me. What is this pursue? Pursue is something, as I said, it's a negative, has negativity associated with it. Says the Chafetz Chaim, everyone is always pursued by something. Life is filled with challenges. it's best that goodness and kindness pursue you. The people are bugging you to help them, rather than you pursuing goodness, pursuing that you have to try to go get help from others. It's better that the challenge be that other people are bothering you and not allowing you your peace, than you having to search and look for others to help you. That's what we're saying. So by the fact that the Jews toiled in Torah up until the death of Levi, that took away all those years of suffering that they might have had to have otherwise. And that should be a very practical, important message and lesson for all of us. Take on challenges. Life is about nisyonis, about challenges, because it brings us to the highest of levels. But when we challenge ourselves, it's far more significant and important than, it's far easier than when God throws us a curveball. So what's your challenge that you're going to take on? We're coming to New Year's. There's an idea of taking on New Year's resolutions, even though it's not our New Year's, but good resolutions are always good. Take on a good New Year's resolution to take on a positive challenge in your Torah study, in your prayer, in your tzedakah, and in your mitzvahs, in any other area of life. Good Shabbos.